Well, let's talk about Gog for a minute, because Gog clearly is the leader here. Gog appears several times in the Bible. It appears again in Revelation 20, which causes a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Because when it talks about the timing of this battle, is it at the end, which there's no way that it could be. But it tells us that Gog is something other than just a man at a specific time, that it seems to be, especially if you read the Septuagint version. Gog is the power behind the man. And God is speaking to Gog, who is causing this trouble, kind of like Ezekiel 28, where he's speaking to the king of Tyre, and he's speaking to the cherubim, and then Isaiah 14. So anyways, I think Gog ultimately is the spiritual force behind a real person. Gog has a name, is a descendant of Reuben in 1 Chronicles 5. But Gog's this leader. There's a leader. Let's just stop there. Whatever this is, there's a main leader. So is it Zeranovsky?
Well, and he's a bad guy.
He's a bad guy.
Not a good guy.
Nope.
And so starting with that, it's very hard to connect Gog with an actual living human being. We would say, well, it's whoever is the head of the Russian government.
Whoever ends up being that guy is going to be Gog.
It's going to be Gog. And that's what I've always thought. And I really strive not to set dates or to see something that's happening right now as being in the Bible narrative, because you can get in trouble. He's I've figured it out, and I know what's going to happen, and then lo and behold, 2 or 3 years later, oops.
That guy's dead. Next candidate.
It doesn't. So we've got to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do have here is a latter-day setting. That I think we can agree on. In other words, now, how do we define latter day? Would that be the time in which we live right now? And I'll just throw that back to you.
Well, what we do know is several times in this passage, which we'll get to, it describes that this battle that will happen in the latter days, in the latter years. It says specifically that it will go up again to the land of Israel, the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. And we know that really from about 100 AD, 135 AD, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, all the way until the early 20th century, the early 1900s, the land absolutely was desolate. I mean, we were talking, Mark Twain, I think his book, Citizens Abroad or something like that. Innocents Abroad, yeah. He was out there and he's like, who would want to live here? This place is absolutely disgusting.
He described it as only Mark Twain can do, and I've read Innocents Abroad, and he spared no language to describe how absolutely desolate this place was. And between the words of his writing, you can get a question. And the question he's asking is, has God really abandoned these people who have been called God's chosen people? That was the big question in his mind. And a lot of people have asked that, and then suddenly, after World War II, in 1948 and beyond, where we are right now, the question got answered. No, God has not abandoned his people. And it took an evil act to bring the power of God into focus and to create a modern state of Israel. And so I think based on what we're seeing there, we're saying we don't see Israel being dispersed from this point on. We see a continuum of events that lead us all the way to the book of Revelation. In other words, I don't believe that Israel is going to be scattered again.
Yeah, I'm not persuaded either that they would be completely scattered out of the land for any lengthy period of time. During the tribulation, would they be fleeing and different things? Maybe. Well, for sure they will be. But the key thing here is that we now have a time factor. This prophecy was given 600 BC about a future battle that would happen after a lengthy period of desolation for the land of Israel.
Well, let me read what Ezekiel says, verse 8 of chapter 38. After many years, thou shalt be visited. In the latter years, thou shalt come into the land that's brought back from the sword. And doesn't that ring of today? And is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have always been waste, but's brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. That word safely, we could talk about that.
We're going to have to talk about that word, yes. Yes.
So again, we're just putting together a little kind of a vignette here and trying to clarify the picture. What should we believe about modern Israel, about Gog? Is Gog alive right now? Do we see him on the evening news? And these are the questions I think that plague all Bible-believing Christians.
Yeah, I would say that, well, I think looking historically, that this battle was predicted, and based on the description here, that it would happen certainly post-1948, but most likely post-67, because even though you had in the early 1900s, you had Jewish immigration very strong, going back into the land of Israel. You had them working the land, changing the land that was desolate into a non-desolate, lots of kibbutzim.
Oh, they sell their produce all over Europe.
All over the world, yeah. I mean, it's amazing. You go there now, it's not desolate. I mean, even to the south, they're turning the desert with their drip irrigation systems and stuff into amazing things. So, let's talk about the word safely here. This is the word batach in Hebrew, betach. You got to get the ch in there.
Okay.
But one of my favorite authors is Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum, Messianic Jewish believer. And
oh, yes.
He talks about the meaning of betach. And in some versions, sadly, will say they will be dwelling there in peace. Well, Israel hasn't been in peace since 1948.
True.
And so, but the word betach has the idea of confidently. And we know that today, if you look at Israel, Psalm 20 says that some trust in chariots, but I'll trust in the name of the Lord. Well, Israel doesn't trust in the name of the Lord. They trust in their chariots.
Oh, yeah.
Their Merkava, right? The tanks, which is what the word chariots mean. It's very fascinating. They are dwelling very confidently. Israel says, even Netanyahu today, we don't need anybody. If we're going to do it, we'll do it ourselves. We don't need any other nations to protect us. If we need to go after Iran, we'll do it alone. They're trusting confidently in their own military strength.
And that's the history. I mean, if you pick up the Bible and start looking at the Old Testament and track the 12 tribes from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and on, and that is characteristic of the 12 tribes.
Yep.
Very confident. And always saved at the last minute. It's a recurring story. And I see that today because, and this kind of brings us to where I think we wanted to focus on today. We see Israel as having very confidently defended itself. And in spite of the fact that the UAE and Turkey and Iraq and Iran and so on, so you have the gathering enemy boasting about the power of his weapons and saying this time for sure we're going to wipe out the tribes. Israel will be no more. There won't even be a land of Israel when we get through. And they're saying it openly. So you would think that the Israelis would react by saying, we have to bow down before the Lord, and we have to prostrate ourselves before Him and ask Him to intercede for us. It's not really what's happening. This is becoming a military battle of the first mark and atomic weapons. And there are rumors galore about which atomic weapons the Israelis have and which atomic weapons the Iranians have. And everybody is looking for a very, very dark period of war. in which perhaps hundreds of thousands of people die. And we don't want to see that. But what does the Bible say? As you read on through Ezekiel 38, Israel is not wiped out. In fact, they're victorious. And we don't have time to read the whole thing and go to the end, but I'm just saying. Israel is going to miraculously survive this current aggression.